Most men fear the moment the divorce papers are signed, terrified of losing half their fortune. Marcus walked into that conference room with a smile, believing he was a predator and his wife, Elena, was the prey. He thought he had outsmarted her, hidden his assets, and secured his future as the CEO of a billion-dollar conglomerate, while leaving her with nothing but a modest settlement. He signed his name with a flourish, claiming his freedom. But Marcus forgot the first rule of war: never underestimate the quiet ones. He didn't know that the ink on the divorce decree didn't signal his victory. It signaled the moment Elena decided to stop protecting him. He thought he ran the empire. He was about to find out he was just an employee, and his ex-wife was the boss. The conference room on the 45th floor of the fictionalized Meridian Law Partners in downtown Chicago smelled of mahogany, expensive leather, and, to Marcus's nose, victory. Marcus sat at the head of the table, his posture relaxed, almost sprawling. He adjusted the cuffs of his Italian suit, glancing at the woman sitting opposite him. Elena. She looked tired, he thought. She was wearing a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look older than her 34 years. She had no jewelry on, not even the diamond studs he had bought her for their 10th anniversary. Though, to be fair, he had bought those with a company credit card, a fact his lawyer had skillfully buried during discovery. If we are all in agreement, Marcus's lawyer, a shark named Bennett with teeth too white for a human, said smoothly, sliding the heavy document across the polished table. This finalizes the asset division. Mr. Marcus retains 100% of his equity in Thornton Media. Ms. Elena waives all claims to future earnings and spousal support in exchange for the lump sum payment of $2 million and the deed to the mountain cabin in Colorado. Marcus suppressed a smirk. The cabin was a money pit. It had dry rot and a leaking roof, and $2 million? That was pocket change. Thornton Media was poised to go public in 3 months. His equity would be worth $50 million conservatively. He was robbing her blind, and she was just sitting there, staring at the paperwork. Elena, her lawyer, a soft-spoken man named Christopher, whispered, "Are you sure about this? We could push for a share of the stock options." The forensic accounting was incomplete. Elena didn't look at Christopher. She looked straight at Marcus. Her eyes were a strange shade of gray, usually warm, but today they were flat, empty. "I'm sure," Elena said, her voice steady. "I just want to be over. I want a clean break." "A clean break?" Marcus repeated, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "That's what's best for everyone, Elena. You were never built for the corporate lifestyle, the stress, the late nights. It was killing you. I'm doing this for your own good." He believed it, too. In Marcus's narrative, he was a hero. He was a dynamic visionary who had taken a small marketing firm and turned it into Thornton Media, a titan of industry. Elena was a college sweetheart he had outgrown, the woman who preferred gardening and reading to galas and networking. She was an anchor dragging him down. Isabel, his executive assistant and current partner, was a sail. Isabel understood ambition. Elena picked up the pen. It was a cheap plastic ballpoint she had pulled from her purse, ignoring the heavy Mont Blanc pen Bennett offered her. "Just one thing, Marcus," she said, hovering the pen over the signature line. "Anything," he said magnanimously. "The non-compete clause," she said. "It says I can't work in media for 5 years. Marcus chuckled. Standard boilerplate. "Elena, it's not like you're going to start a rival network. You haven't worked a day in your life since we got married." "True," she said, "but I'd like it removed, just on principle." Marcus waved his hand dismissively at Bennett. "Strike it. Let her work wherever she wants. Let her sell newspapers on the corner for all I care." Bennett scribbled out the clause and initialed it. Elena signed the document. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper felt like the sweetest music Marcus had ever heard. It was done. He was free. He was rich. And he was solely in charge. "Well," Marcus said, standing up and buttoning his jacket, "I'd say it's been a pleasure," but he didn't finish the sentence. He just grabbed his copy of the decree. "Take care of yourself. Elena, try to find a hobby." Elena stood up slowly. She placed the plastic pen back in her purse. She didn't look sad. She didn't look angry. She looked like someone who had just taken out the trash. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said, Enjoy the company. Oh, I will, he laughed. I built it after all. He walked out of the office without looking back. If he had turned around, he might have seen the slight, chilling smile that finally touched Elena's lips. He might have seen her lawyer, Christopher, close his folder and whisper, "Are you ready to initiate phase 2, Mom?" And he might have heard Elena reply, "Not yet, Christopher. Let him have his champagne. I want the hangover to be catastrophic." The champagne flowed freely at the Apex, the most exclusive rooftop lounge in city. Marcus held court in the VIP section, surrounded by sycophants, junior executives, and Isabel, who was draped over his arm in a red dress that cost more than Elena's entire post-divorce wardrobe. "To Marcus!" shouted a heavy vice president named Mike, raising his glass. "The man who beat the system, single, rich, and taking us to the IPO. To Marcus." The group chorused. Marcus basked in the adulation. He took a sip of the vintage Dom Perignon. It tasted like freedom. "I'm telling you," Marcus said, leaning back against a velvet sofa. "It's all about negotiation. She wanted the house in Lake Geneva. I told her, 'Elena, the property taxes alone will bankrupt you.' Scared her right off it. She took the rotting cabin instead." Isabel giggled, tracing the rim of her glass. "You're terrible, darling." But she really didn't know about the merger talks with Platinum Corp. She doesn't know the difference between a merger and a margin call. Marcus scoffed. "Elena lived in a bubble I created for her. She thinks money grows on trees, not from blood and sweat." He checked his phone. The stock ticker for Thornton Media was up 3 points in after-hours trading. The market loved a CEO who was unencumbered by a messy marriage. "So what's the next move, boss?" Mike asked, loosening his tie. "With the divorce finalized, we can finally sign the deal with the investors from Geneva, right?" Monday morning, Marcus declared, "The Geneva group has been hesitant because of the potential risk of my assets being frozen. Now that I have the decree in hand, they'll sign. That capital injection will push us into the global market. We're going to buy out our biggest competitor, Foster Technologies." "Foster Technologies?" Isabel asked. "I thought they were untouchable. Nobody even knows who owns them. It's all shell companies and trusts." "Everyone has a price," Marcus said arrogantly. "Foster has been eating into our market share for 2 years. They're a nuisance. I'm going to crush them, or I'm going to buy them. Either way, Thornton Media wins." Marcus's phone buzzed. It was an email notification. He glanced at it. It was from the board of directors. Subject: Emergency board meeting Monday, 8 a.m. Marcus frowned. "That's odd." "What is it?" Isabel asked. "The board called a meeting for Monday morning. Usually they check with my secretary first." He shrugged, dismissing the worry. "Probably want to congratulate me on the divorce settlement. They were worried Elena would get a voting share. Now that she's out, my position is secure." "You're the king," Isabel whispered in his ear. "Yes," Marcus said, looking out over the city lights. "I am." He didn't know that 3 blocks away, in a quiet, dimly lit study, Elena was sitting behind a massive oak desk. She wasn't drinking champagne. She was drinking herbal tea. In front of her was a complex organizational chart. At the bottom was Thornton Media. Above that was a layer of investors. Above that was the Geneva Group. And above the Geneva Group, connected by a series of dotted lines representing holding companies in Delaware, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands, was a single entity, EA Ventures. Christopher, her lawyer, stood by the bookshelf. "The Geneva Group has received your instructions, Mom," Christopher said. "They have halted the capital injection for Thornton Media." "Good," Elena said. "And I've sent the notice to the board of directors at Thornton," Christopher continued. "They know there's a hostile takeover bid imminent. They are panicking." "Marcus thinks he's buying Foster Technologies," Elena said softly, tracing a line on the chart. "He does," Christopher nodded. "He doesn't know that Foster Technologies isn't a competitor," Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He doesn't know that I created Foster Technologies 3 years ago specifically to test his competence. And he failed, Christopher. He lost market share to a company that I ran from my laptop in the guest bedroom while he was out working late with Isabel. Elena stood up and walked to a window. She could see the flashing lights of the Apex in the distance. She imagined Marcus laughing. "He called me a bad investment," Elena said. "He said I was a liability." "He was incorrect," Christopher noted dryly. Monday morning, Elena said, "I want to be there," at the Thornton board meeting. Christopher looked surprised. "Mom, you have no official standing. You're just the ex-wife." Elena turned, and for the first time, the steel in her spine was visible. She wasn't the quiet housewife anymore. She was a woman who had secretly invested her inheritance, multiplied it 10 times over, and controlled the very debt that kept Marcus's company afloat. "I'm not going as his ex-wife, Christopher," she said. "I'm going as the owner of the debt. I'm going as the chairman of EA Ventures. It's time Marcus met his real boss." Monday morning arrived with a torrential downpour, matching Marcus's sudden foul mood. The weekend euphoria had evaporated the moment he stepped into the Thornton media lobby. The atmosphere was wrong. People weren't looking at him with the usual reverence. They were whispering. They were looking at their phones, and then quickly looking away when he passed. Marcus marched to the elevator, Isabel trailing behind him with her tablet. "Why is the stock down?" Marcus snapped. "I saw it drop 4% in pre-market." "I don't know," Isabel stammered. "There's a rumor. Something about a liquidity crisis." "Liquidity crisis? We're drowning in cash." Marcus barked. "Get me the CFO on the line." He stormed into the boardroom. He expected to see the usual 12 faces, mostly older men he had handpicked, men he could bully. Instead, the room was full. The board was there, looking pale and terrified. But there were strangers. 2. 3 men in dark suits sat on the far side of the table, their briefcases open. And at the head of the table, his seat, sat a woman. Her back was to him. She was looking out the window at the rain. The high-backed leather chair swallowed her frame, but the posture was unmistakable. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice booming. "You're in my seat." The board members flinched. One of them, a banker named Thomas, cleared his throat. "Marcus, please sit down." "Sit down? Who are these people?" Marcus pointed at the strangers. "And who is she?" The woman in the chair slowly swiveled around. Marcus froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was Elena. But it wasn't the Elena he had divorced on Friday. That Elena wore off-the-rack department store dresses and minimal makeup. This Elena was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that screamed power. Her hair was down, cascading in waves, and she wore a pair of glasses he had never seen before. Thick frames that made her look sharp, intellectual, dangerous. "Hello, Marcus," she said. Her voice wasn't quiet. It projected across the room with effortless authority. "Elena!" Marcus let out a breathless, confused laugh. "What are you doing here? Did you get lost looking for the exit? The alimony check is in the mail." "Honey, you don't need to stalk me." He turned to the security guard by the door. "Escort Mrs. Excuse me, Ms. Elena out of the building. She's trespassing." The guard didn't move. He looked at Elena. "He stays," Elena said to the guard. Then she looked at Marcus. "Sit down, Marcus. We have business to discuss." "I'm not sitting down until you tell me what the hell is going on." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "Thomas, why is my ex-wife in a board meeting?" Thomas looked at his shoes. "Marcus, the financing from the Geneva Group fell through this morning." Marcus went cold. "What? Why?" "Because," Elena interjected, folding her hands on the table, "the Geneva Group does not invest in companies with unstable leadership and fraudulent accounting practices." "Fraudulent." Marcus's face turned red. "How dare you? You don't know what you're talking about. You're a housewife." "Actually," one of the strangers in the dark suit spoke up, "she is a majority shareholder." The room went silent. The silence was so heavy it felt like it would crush Marcus's lungs. "What?" Marcus whispered. "Allow me to explain," Elena said, opening a leather folder. 5 years ago, when Thornton Media was struggling, you took out a high-risk loan to keep the lights on. You didn't read the fine print on who bought. That debt 2 years later. A shell company bought it. Sentinel something. Marcus said defensively. Sentinel is a subsidiary of EA Ventures. Elena said. EA stands for Elena Alice, my middle name. You never did remember it. Marcus gripped the back of a chair to steady himself. You own my debt. I own your debt, Elena corrected. And because you missed a covenant requirement last quarter, something about maintaining a certain cash flow to debt ratio, which you blew by buying a corporate jet, I have exercised my right to convert that debt into equity. She slid a paper across the table. It looked terrifyingly similar to the divorce decree, but much, much worse. As of 8 a.m. this morning, Elena said, EA Ventures owns 51% of Thornton Media. I am the controlling interest. I am the owner. Marcus looked around the room. The board members refused to meet his eyes. They knew. They had known for an hour. They had flipped. This is illegal, Marcus stammered. We have a divorce settlement. You waive your rights to my assets. I waive my rights to your personal assets, Elena said coolly. I waive my claim to your 49% of the stock as a spouse. But EA Ventures is a separate legal entity. My company bought your company, Marcus. It has nothing to do with our marriage. It's just business. Marcus looked at Isabel. Isabel was backing away toward the door, her eyes wide. She smelled the blood in the water. So, Elena said, tapping her finger on the mahogany table, now that we've established a hierarchy, let's talk about your performance review. My performance? Marcus spat. I made this company. You made a brand, Elena corrected. You spent millions on marketing and parties and jets, but the underlying financials are disaster. You've been cooking the books to inflate the stock price, Marcus. I have the audit reports right here. She signaled to the strangers. These gentlemen are forensic accountants from the firm I hired. They've been going through the digital records all weekend. You hacked me, Marcus accused. I didn't have to, Elena smiled. You gave me your passwords years ago because you couldn't be bothered to remember them. You told me to keep track of the boring stuff. So I did. She stood up. The room seemed to shrink around her. The board has voted Marcus. Effective immediately, you are removed as CEO of Thornton Media. For cause. There will be no severance package, no golden parachute. Marcus felt his knees give way. He sank into the chair he was gripping. You can't do this. It's done, Elena said. Security will escort you to your office to collect your personal effects. You have 1 hour. Anything left after that becomes the property of the company. She looked at him with that same flat gray gaze from the law office. Oh, and Marcus, she added, get out of my chair. The walk from the boardroom to the CEO's office, a distance of perhaps 50 yards, felt like a march to the gallows. Marcus moved stiffly, his face a mask of shock that was rapidly crumbling into panic. 2 security guards, men Marcus had ignored for years, flanked him closely. They weren't deferential anymore. They were hurting him. When Marcus reached his office, the glass sanctuary he had designed to intimidate subordinates, he found the door already unlocked. Inside, Isabel was frantically shoving items into her designer handbag. Isabel, Marcus gasped, rushing in and slamming the door, though the security guards immediately pushed it open again and stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Thank God. We need to regroup. Listen, I have a safe in the wall behind the painting. There's cash there, passports, hard drives. We can go to the Bahamas house until this blows over. Isabel didn't look up. She was dumping the contents of her desk drawer into a box. Perfume, a golden stapler, a framed photo of herself. Isabel. Marcus grabbed her arm. She ripped her arm away, her eyes flashing with a coldness that rivaled the winter storm outside. Don't touch me, Marcus. What is this? Marcus stepped back, bewildered. This is just a setback. A corporate raid. I'll sue her. I'll get it back. We're a team. Isabel let out a sharp, cruel laugh. A team? Marcus, look at you. You're done. I heard the accountants talking in the hallway. They found the wire transfers to the shell companies in Panama, the ones you forged signatures for. That's not a lawsuit Marcus. That's federal prison. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. I can fix that. I just need access to my accounts. You don't have accounts, Isabel spat. Elena froze the corporate assets. And since you use company funds to pay for my apartment and my car, she's seizing those, too. I'm being evicted, Marcus, because of you. She zipped up her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and looked him up and down with sneering distaste. I stuck around because you were a winner. I don't do losers, and I certainly don't do prison wives. Isabel, wait, Marcus pleaded, reaching for her. I still have the personal savings, the offshore account I told you about. Good luck with that, she said, brushing past him. She stopped at the door, glancing back one last time. By the way, I'm taking the Porsche. It's in my name. Remember? The one smart thing I did. She walked out, the click-clack of her heels echoing down the silent corridor. Marcus stood alone in the center of the office that was no longer his. He turned to the security guards. I need a moment of privacy. Door stays open, sir, the guard on the left grunted. Standard protocol for terminated employees. Marcus cursed under his breath and rushed to the large abstract painting behind his desk. He swung it aside, revealing a heavy steel safe. His hand shook violently as he punched in the code, 1-9-8-5. The year he was born. The light blinked red. Error. He tried again. 1-9-8-5. Error. Panic clawed at his throat. He tried his backup code. 0-0-0-0-0-0. Error. Is there a problem, Mr. Marcus? Marcus spun around. Elena was standing in the doorway. She hadn't entered the office. She stood on the threshold, respecting the boundary of the space she now owned. You changed the code, Marcus hissed. That's my personal property in there. Actually, Elena said calmly, holding up a tablet, the safe was purchased with company funds 3 years ago. Therefore, it is company property. And as for the contents, she tapped the screen of her tablet. The safe door clicked and swung open with a pneumatic hiss. Marcus lunged for it, but the security guard stepped in front of him, a massive wall of muscle. Marcus peered around him. The safe was empty. Where is it? Marcus screamed. There was $50,000 in cash. There were bearer bonds, deeds. The forensic team opened it 10 minutes before you arrived, Elena said. The cash has been cataloged as restitution for the company funds you embezzled. The bonds? Well, those were interesting. They were purchased in my father's name, weren't they? Using the power of attorney, you tricked him into signing before he died. Marcus went silent. The air in the room felt thin. You knew, he whispered. You knew about your father. I knew everything, Marcus, Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. I knew you pressured my father to sell you his patents for pennies on the dollar when his dementia set in. I knew you used that technology to launch Thornton Media. I knew you thought I was just a grieving daughter, too stupid to read the contracts. She took a step closer, her eyes blazing. You didn't just steal my inheritance, Marcus. You stole my father's legacy. And then you had the audacity to cheat on me and try to leave me with nothing. Did you really think I was just guarding all those years? Marcus slumped against the desk. The fight was leaving him. How? I learned, she said. I took night classes online while you were at client dinners. I hired Christopher 3 years ago. I built EA Ventures with a small trust fund you couldn't touch, and I leveraged it. I bought your debt because I knew you were reckless. I knew you would overextend yourself. I just had to wait for you to make a mistake. She gestured to the cardboard box on the floor. Pack your things, Marcus. You have 10 minutes left. And take the picture of Isabel. You're going to need something to keep you warm. Marcus packed in a daze. He threw in a few awards, a stress ball, and his coffee mug. When he walked out building, carrying the box, it was still pouring rain. There was no company car waiting for him. No Uber Black. Isabel was gone with the Porsche. He stood on the curb, the rain soaking his expensive Italian suit, ruining the silk, matting his hair to his skull. Passers-by hurried past, ignoring the man who just yesterday had been a king. He hailed a yellow taxi. As he climbed in, he looked up at the skyscraper one last time. He saw the lights on the top floor, his floor. He imagined Elena standing there, looking down. Where to, Mac? The driver asked. Marcus realized with joy that he didn't know. The penthouse was in the company name. The Lake Geneva house had been sold last year to cover losses. He had the cabin in Colorado, but that was 6 hours away. Just drive, Marcus muttered. Find me a hotel. Something cheap. The Plaza Inn was neither a plaza, nor an inn in the traditional sense. It was a motel on the outskirts of the city near the airport, where the roar of jet engines shook the thin walls every 4 minutes. The carpet smelled of stale smoke and regret. Marcus sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the peeling wallpaper. It had been 3 days since the board meeting, 3 days of silence. He had tried to call his contacts, the bankers who had bought him drinks, the politicians he had donated to, the golf buddies. No one answered. His number had become radioactive. He picked up his phone to try Bennett, his divorce lawyer, for the 10th time. Finally, the call connected. Marcus. Bennett's voice was clipped, impatient. I told you not to call me. Bennett, you have to help me, Marcus pleaded, gripping the phone. I need to file an injunction. We need to contest the takeover. Elena trapped me. Marcus, listen to me closely, Bennett said. I can't represent you anymore. What? I paid you a retainer. That retainer is gone, Bennett said. And frankly, it wouldn't cover the hours I'd need to fight this. Do you have any idea what she has on you? Her lawyer sent over a discovery package this morning. It's extensive. It's all circumstantial, Marcus lied. It's a recorded conversation, Marcus. Bennett snapped. A recording of you and the CFO discussing how to hide the losses from the Q3 report. She has the tapes. Apparently, she installed the security system in the office herself. Marcus felt the room spin. The security system. He had let Elena handle the vendor contracts because he thought it was menial work. She had the master keys to everything. I'm not going down for this, Marcus whispered. You're on your own, Marcus, Bennett said. And a piece of advice? Don't leave the state. I heard the district attorney is preparing an indictment. The line went dead. Marcus threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the wall and cracked. He needed money. Real money. He checked his mobile banking app on the cracked screen. Balance. $412. His credit cards were declined. His assets were frozen by the court, pending the fraud investigation. He was a billionaire on paper 3 days ago, and now he couldn't afford a burger. A heavy knock on the door made him jump. Housekeeping. A voice called out. Go away, Marcus shouted. The door opened anyway. It wasn't housekeeping. It was a process server, a burly man in a windbreaker. He stepped into the room, wrinkled his nose at the smell, and tossed a thick stack of papers onto the bed. Marcus Sterling? The man asked. Get out, Marcus growled. You've been served, the man said. Civil suit from EA Ventures for breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, and corporate theft. Oh, and there's a restraining order in there, too. You're not allowed within 500 feet of the Thornton Media Building or Ms. Elena. The man turned to leave, then paused. Hey, aren't you the guy from the magazine cover? The man who has everything. Marcus didn't answer. He stared at the floor. Life comes at you fast, huh? The man chuckled and closed the door. Marcus sank to his knees. He grabbed the papers. The numbers were staggering. She was suing him for $50 million in damages. She wasn't just firing him. She was ensuring he would never, ever financially recover. She was burying him under a mountain of debt that would follow him to his grave. He felt a sudden surge of rage. This wasn't justice. This was cruelty. He had to talk to her. He had to make her see reason. If he could just charm her, just one last time. He had always been able to manipulate Elena. He just needed to get in a room with her. He grabbed his coat. He didn't care about the restraining order. He had to see her. 2 hours later, Marcus stood outside the gates of the estate they used to share. It was a sprawling mansion in Lake Forest. He expected to see it dark, abandoned. Instead, the lights were on. There were cars in the driveway. expensive cars. A gala was happening. Marcus pulled his collar up. He looked like a vagrant. He slipped through a gap in the hedge he knew about. A gap he used to sneak back in after late nights out. He crept up to the library window and peered inside. The room was warm, filled with laughter. He saw Christopher, the lawyer, holding a glass of wine. He saw the board members, the same men who betrayed him, laughing and toasting. And in the center, sitting in his favorite leather wingback chair, was Elena. She looked radiant. She was wearing a red dress, the color of power, the color Isabel used to wear. She was laughing at something Christopher said, her head thrown back, looking younger and more alive than she had in 10 years of marriage. She wasn't mourning the divorce. She was celebrating the liberation. Marcus placed his hand on the cold glass. He wanted to smash it. He wanted to scream. But then he saw someone else approach Elena. A man. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a kind face. He handed Elena a drink and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Elena looked up at him and smiled, a genuine, soft smile that Marcus realized he hadn't seen directed at him in a decade. It was the owner of Foster Technologies, the man Marcus thought was his enemy. Marcus realized with a sick lurch that this man wasn't just a business rival. He was a partner in every sense. Elena turned her head, and for a split second, her eyes seemed to lock onto the window. She couldn't possibly see him in the dark garden, but her expression shifted. She raised her glass slightly, as if toasting the darkness. Marcus pulled back into the shadows, his heart hammering against his ribs. He turned to run, but a flashlight beam hit him in the face. "Police!" a voice shouted. "Get on the ground." Marcus shielded his eyes. "No, wait. I live here. I used to live here." 2 officers grabbed him, forcing him into the wet grass, the mud cold against his cheek. "Marcus Sterling," the officer said, clicking the handcuffs onto his wrists. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Violation of a restraining order. Trespassing. And looks like we just got a call from the FBI regarding wire fraud." Marcus struggled, mud smearing his face. "Let me talk to my wife. Elena, tell them to stop." He looked toward the house. The library window was empty. Elena had closed the curtains. She wasn't coming to save him. She had moved the pieces, set the trap, and now she was simply closing the book. As the police dragged him toward the patrol car, the flashing blue and red lights illuminating the facade of the mansion he had bought but she now owned, Marcus finally understood the depth of his failure. He hadn't just lost a company. He had lost the war before he even knew the first shot had been fired. "I'm innocent," Marcus sobbed as they shoved him into the back seat. The officer slammed the door. "Tell it to the judge, pal." From the second-floor window, hidden behind the velvet drapes, Elena watched the patrol car drive away. She took a sip of her wine. "Is it done?" Christopher asked quietly from behind her. "The police have him," Elena said calmly. "Phase 3 is complete. And the press release?" "Release it," Elena said, turning back to the warm room. "Tell the world that Thornton Media is under new management." And Christopher, "Yes, Mom." "Make sure the headline says The Empress Returns." The trial of the people versus Marcus Sterling did not begin with a bang, but with the suffocating crush of a media circus. The steps of the Northern District Courthouse were a sea of microphones, cameras, and reporters hungry for the fall of the man who had once graced the cover of Fortune magazine. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, a place that felt entirely foreign to him, gone were the bespoke Italian suits. He wore a slightly ill-fitting Navy suit purchased off the rack by his court-appointed attorney, a weary man named Robert Hayes, who smelled faintly of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. Robert was competent, but he was not a miracle worker, and he certainly wasn't the high-powered legal shark Marcus was used to commanding. The courtroom was packed. In the front row, sitting with the poise of a queen, was Elena. She wore a cream-colored suit, her face unreadable. Next to her sat Christopher, her loyal lawyer, and the man from the library window, whom Marcus now knew as Ryan Foster, the brilliant engineer behind Foster Technologies. They looked like a united front. Marcus looked like a man drowning. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. The Honorable Judge Patricia Reynolds swept into the room. She was a woman known for her disdain for white-collar criminals. She peered over her spectacles at Marcus, her gaze sharp and unforgiving. "Be seated," Judge Reynolds commanded. "Ms. Prosecutor, you may proceed." The prosecutor, a sharp-witted woman named Diana Morrison, who had a reputation for tearing executives apart, stood up. She didn't shout. She walked slowly to the jury box, making eye contact with every juror. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, her voice steady, "greed is a common story in this city. But what you are about to hear is not just a story of greed. It is a story of systematic betrayal. Marcus Sterling didn't just steal from a company. He stole from his wife. He stole from his investors. And he stole from the very people who trusted him to lead. He treated Thornton Media as his personal piggy bank, and when the walls began to close in, he tried to burn the house down." She turned and pointed a finger at Marcus. "We will show that Mr. Sterling embezzled over $12 million. We will show that he forged signatures. And we will show that he did it all while smiling at the cameras, playing the role of the genius CEO." Marcus gripped the table. He wanted to scream that it was a lie, that it was all a misunderstanding, but Robert placed a heavy hand on his forearm to silence him. The prosecution's case was a masterclass in forensic dismantling. For 3 days, forensic accountants presented colorful charts showing the flow of money from Thornton Media into shell companies with names like Apex Holdings and Horizon Ventures, companies that traced directly back to accounts controlled by Marcus. But the real blow came on the 4th day. "The prosecution calls Isabel Moreau to the stand," Morrison announced. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Marcus's head snapped up. "Isabel." The doors opened, and Isabel walked in. She looked different. The flashy red dresses were gone. She wore a modest gray cardigan and black slacks. She looked humble. She looked like a victim. She refused to look at Marcus as she took the oath. "Ms. Moreau," Morrison asked gently, "what was your relationship with the defendant?" "I was his executive assistant," Isabel said, her voice trembling slightly. "And I was his mistress." "And during your time with Mr. Sterling, did he ever discuss his financial practices?" "Yes," Isabel said, wiping a tear from her eye. "He told me that the company was his to do with as he pleased. He used to laugh about the board of directors. He called them sheep. He made me deposit checks into the offshore accounts. I didn't want to, but I was afraid of losing my job. He said if I didn't do it, he'd ruin me." Marcus stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's a lie. She begged for that money. She spent it on jewelry." "Sit down, Mr. Sterling." Judge Reynolds banged her gavel, the sound cracking like a whip. "One more outburst, and I will have you bound and gagged. Do you understand?" Marcus sank back down, his face burning. He looked at the jury. They weren't looking at him with sympathy. They were looking at him with disgust. Isabel had played her part perfectly. She had cut a deal for immunity, trading Marcus's life for her freedom. But the final nail in the coffin was yet to come. On the final day of testimony, the defense, which had been lackluster at best, rested. Marcus had wanted to testify, to charm the jury, but Robert had forbidden it. "You come off as arrogant, Marcus," Robert had said bluntly. "If you open your mouth, you'll get 20 years instead of 10. The prosecution called one final rebuttal witness. The prosecution calls Elena Sterling. Elena walked to the stand. The silence in the room was absolute. She sat down, smoothed her skirt, and looked directly at the prosecutor. "Mrs. Sterling," Morrison asked, "when did you first suspect your husband was embezzling funds?" 3 years ago, Elena said clearly. "And why didn't you go to the police then?" Elena paused. She looked at Marcus. It was the first time she had looked him in the eyes since the arrest. "Because I knew the police couldn't stop him," Elena said. "Marcus is persuasive. He would have talked his way out of it. He would have destroyed the evidence. I needed to be sure. I needed to protect my father's legacy. So I gathered the evidence myself. I waited until I had everything." "And did you find specific evidence of his intent?" "I did," Elena said. "I found a voice memo on his private cloud server. It was recorded the night he decided to propose the fraudulent merger." "Please play the recording," Morrison said. The courtroom speakers crackled to life. Marcus's voice, unmistakable, filled the air. It sounded drunk, arrogant, boasting. Elena doesn't have a clue. She thinks I'm working late. I'm going to bleed this company dry, shift the debt to her name, and then file for divorce. I'll walk away with the cash, and she'll be left with the bankruptcy. It's the perfect crime. The widow's ploy, I call it. She's too soft to fight back. The recording ended with the sound of Marcus laughing. A cruel, mocking laugh. The courtroom erupted. The jury members looked at Marcus with pure hatred. Even Robert, his lawyer, moved his chair slightly away from Marcus. Marcus stared at the table, the blood rushing in his ears. He remembered that night. He had been drunk in his office, talking to himself, recording his memoirs for the biography he planned to write one day. He had forgotten the auto backup feature. Elena had heard it. She had heard him planning to destroy her years ago. "No further questions," Morrison said softly. As Elena walked past the defense table to return to her seat, she paused for a microsecond near Marcus. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The look on her face said it all. Checkmate. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. It was a record for a case of this magnitude. When they returned, Marcus stood up. His legs felt like lead. He looked at the foreman, a middle-aged school teacher who refused to meet his eyes. In the matter of the people versus Marcus Sterling, Judge Reynolds intoned, "How do you find the defendant?" "On count 1, wire fraud," the foreman read, "we find the defendant guilty." Marcus closed his eyes. "On count 2, embezzlement, guilty. On count 3, money laundering, guilty. On count 4, conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty." The word guilty rang out 24 times. A perfect sweep. Judge Reynolds looked at Marcus over her spectacles. "Marcus Sterling, you've been found guilty of crimes that show a staggering lack of moral character. You lived a life of opulence stolen from the labor of others. You betrayed your family and your shareholders. I see no remorse in you, only regret that you were caught." The judge paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "I am sentencing you to 15 years in a federal penitentiary with no possibility of parole for at least 12 years. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $12 million. Court is adjourned." The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. 2 marshals moved in immediately, grabbing Marcus's arms. He didn't fight this time. He was numb as they led him away. He turned his head to look at the gallery one last time. The room was emptying. Isabel had already vanished, but Elena was still there. She was standing near the exit, putting on her coat. She watched him being led away, her expression serene. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply turned around and walked out into the sunlight. 5 years later, the commissary at the Riverside Federal Correctional Institution was loud, smelling of bleach and overcooked beans. Marcus sat at a metal table, nursing a cup of lukewarm instant coffee. His hair was gray now. The stress of prison life had aged him 20 years. He worked in the laundry detail, folding sheets for 12 cents an hour. "Hey, Sterling," a younger inmate named Jake slid a magazine across the table. "Look who made the cover of Time." Marcus looked down. His heart skipped a beat. It was Elena. She looked magnificent. She was standing on the balcony of the new Thornton Foster headquarters, a futuristic glass tower in Singapore. The headline read, "The Empress of Media, How Elena Sterling Built a Global Empire from the Ashes." Marcus's hands shook as he turned the pages. The article detailed her rise. After the trial, she had merged Thornton Media with Foster Technologies. Under her leadership, the company had pivoted to renewable energy tech and global streaming. She was now one of the wealthiest women in the world. There was a photo of her at a charity gala. She was laughing, holding hands with Ryan Foster. The caption read, "CEO Elena Sterling and her husband, CTO Ryan Foster, pledging $1 billion to education reform." She had remarried. She was happy. She had taken the broken pieces he left behind and built a castle. Marcus read the interview portion. Interviewer: "You face a hostile takeover from within your own family. How did you survive that betrayal?" Elena: "I didn't just survive it. I learned from it. My first husband taught me a valuable lesson. He taught me that kindness without strength is just vulnerability. I have him to thank for my ambition. He forced me to become the person I needed to be. Marcus stared at the words. She didn't hate him. She pitied him. She considered him a stepping stone, a lesson learned on her path to greatness. He wasn't the hero of the story. He wasn't even the villain anymore. He was just a footnote in her biography. He looked around the bleak prison cafeteria. The walls were gray cinder block. The window was barred. This was his empire now. A 6x8 cell and a job folding sheets. He closed the magazine and pushed it away. "You know her?" Jake asked, taking a bite of his apple. "I used to," Marcus whispered, his voice raspy. "I used to be married to her." Jake laughed, shaking his head. "Yeah, right, old man. And I used to be the Prince of Monaco. Keep dreaming." Jake walked away, leaving Marcus alone at the table. Marcus looked at the magazine one last time, then stood up to go back to the laundry room. The buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the break. He joined a line of men in orange jumpsuits, shuffling forward, head down, anonymous and forgotten. Epilogue. Outside in the free world, Elena sat in her office overlooking the Singapore skyline. Her assistant buzzed in. "Mrs. Foster, the helicopter is ready to take you to the summit in Tokyo." "Thank you," Elena said. She stood up, grabbing her briefcase. She walked past a small framed photo on her desk. It wasn't a picture of Marcus. It was a picture of her father. "We did it, Dad," she whispered. She walked out of the office, turning off the lights. The empire was safe. The war was over. And for the first time in a long time, everything was exactly as it should be. The moral, the story of Marcus and Elena serves as a powerful reminder that underestimating the quiet people in your life is a fatal mistake. Marcus believed that power came from noise, from intimidation, and from image. He failed to realize that true power is silent, strategic, and resilient. He thought he was playing a game of checkers, claiming victory after a single jump, while Elena was playing three-dimensional chess, waiting for the perfect moment to checkmate the king. In the end, karma didn't just knock on Marcus's door. It kicked it down, proving that while lies may sprint, the truth runs a marathon, and it always crosses the finish line. The end.